Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Strategy and Technology, a Practical Primer. We are in week 3 with the theme of strategy execution. This week, which is the 14th in the series of lectures, we will discuss execution case study. I have already talked about Market Pharma as a case study of how the company moved from being a predominantly API and less regulated market company to a globally oriented, fully integrated pharmaceutical corporation operating in not only APIs but also in dosage forms and drug discovery and development. Also shifting gears from less regulated markets to fully regulated markets such as USA and Europe. In this lecture, we will talk about the case study of Hospira was a global injectables giant when it took certain decisions to enter India. But before that, let's talk about Hospira as a company and its essential business platform. The company's vision and mission was to keep the patients first with the world's largest range of sterile injectable products and medical devices. It was one generic company which was completely focused on sterile injectable products, that is, products which are life-saving. Its strategy was driving growth and competitiveness with investments in India for expansion, integration and diversification. It was already well diversified in the United States of America with several manufacturing plants. It also had markets predominantly in the United States of America. However, to become a much more impactful global company and also have competitiveness in cost and project management, it decided that it should have a strong base in India. So the strategy was panned out as driving growth and competitiveness with investments in India for expansion, for integration and diversification. To be able to do that, Hospira decided to create a structure, own and create world-class manufacturing and R&D facilities in India with network collaboration wherever necessary. And in terms of execution, the company wanted to be agile on multiple fronts with accompanying cultural transformation. That was the overall essential business platform of Hospira. Hospira, as I said, was a global sterile injectables corporation. It had a hoary history. It was once the hospital's products division of Abbott. Abbott itself was a giant in pharmaceutical industry. However, the pharma devices industry or the medical devices industry was not doing great under Abbott, and it had dated equipment, dated facilities, and Abbott wanted to focus much more on innovator products. Therefore, it decided once upon a time to close down the unit. However, the management team of erstwhile medical devices division of Abbott, which became Hospira, offered to take over that division and grow it into a generics company. That's how Hospira was born. Upon its genesis, Hospira took certain key diversification decisions. It bought Maine, which had operations in Australia and in Europe. Maine was a company which was focused on first-to-file oncology products. It also acquired certain facilities elsewhere and certain markets elsewhere, but it was not really adding to the kind of impact which Hospira was looking for. Therefore, it decided to come into India and set up an R&D and manufacturing base. Before entering into a final decision-making stage, Hospira evaluated several opportunities and then decided that it should focus on antibiotic sterile formulations R&D, antibiotic sterile formulations manufacture, and all of these as developed and produced in India to be exported to parent corporation. The global MNC thus started with a very simple objective of acquiring a sterile injectables business, R&D and manufacturing with drug filings and pipeline with US FDA approval for the facilities as well as for the abbreviated new drug applications. This strategy was implemented in a project or program mode. The synchronized culmination of these projects and programs resulted in a competitive advantage for the firm. An example from Hospira's India strategy was 2010 to 2015 growth program that unveiled. First of all, it considered several companies in India and decided which company was the best suited in terms of technological capability, regulatory standing, and the product breadth and depth. Based on the analysis, company decided to acquire Orchid Sterile Injectables business, which was in the antibiotics area, covering both manufacturing and R&D. As I discussed in the previous lecture, Orchid by the time was having a heavy overhang of debt and was looking to ways and means to pare down the debt. So it makes a win-win collaboration for both Hospira and Orchid. Orchid already had a relationship of strategic alliance to put into US and European markets certain penicillin and certain carbapenem products. So it made sense for Hospira also to secure the manufacturing base. Once that was done in 2010, in the month of March, it also did doubling of the acquired antibiotics manufacturing and R&D capacity. It established a new biologics R&D facility, established a new medical device R&D facility, established a non-antibiotic sterile injectables facility in Vizag, acquired antibiotics API business, sterile and non-sterile manufacturing and R&D to support the antibiotic formulations that were being done in Chennai. It also established global centers of excellence in medical affairs and regulatory affairs, conducted several product and technology transfers to Indian sites so that the existing products could be more competitive, rationalized global development and manufacturing footprint so that there would be higher bias in terms of Indian development and manufacture, therefore higher level of cost competitiveness in the overall product range. It also enhanced the commitment to oncology joint venture, which was acquired from Maine. Maine and Zydus Group had oncology joint venture based in Ahmedabad, and it decided to enhance the commitment to oncology joint venture. This India strategy resulted in enhanced capacity, lower costs, and increased global business for Hospira. However, it is very important to note that items which are listed as number 3, number 4, number 6, number 7, number 9 all emerged after the acquisition of Market Pharma sterile injectables business, and based on the advocacy by the local management in India of the new subsidiary, and particularly the commitment provided me as the managing director of that company that much more could be done in India than just being a workshop for cephalosporin antibiotics or just a development laboratory for cephalosporin antibiotics. That's how what was considered as a simple acquisition became very strong and robust wide spectrum injectables business out of India, duly supported by biologic and medical device endeavors to complement whatever the global portfolio Hospira had. If you therefore look at it, it was a kind of very strategic and very structural move supported by execution that catapulted Hospira India as the new center of gravity for Hospira Global. As I said in my past lectures, strategy, structure, and execution are equally and simultaneously important for effective leadership. An effective leader is one who, for each objective he or she chooses, visualizes an end-to-end picture of strategy, structure, and execution. That is to say, if a managing director or the CEO of the company decides to enter into a new business, for example, this pharmaceutical company wants to enter into specialty chemicals business, the leader should be able to visualize the entire value chain that is required, the kind of organizational ecosystem that needs to be covered and then developed, the networking requirements that exist as part of the ecosystem development, the cost and price parameters, the drivers of competitiveness, and so on. So the total picture that could emerge out of a decision is the one which will drive strategy, structure, and execution of effective leader. Hospira's decision in 2008 to work towards establishing the manufacturing and R&D base in India is a case in point for that. Hospira's growth story is a perfect example of effective leadership based on the strategy, structure, execution trilogy. In 2008, the global generics firm decided to leverage Indian pharmaceutical and engineering talent and low-cost capabilities. Many generic companies such as Apotex, Pharma had strategic alliances in terms of taking products from India and marketing in the US. Hospira wanted to go one step further. If only marketing advantage was secured, that is 50% of the profit share. However, if the R&D and manufacturing were also secured, it would be 100% of the profitability that is going to accrue to the global major. And in addition, the development and manufacturing can be done as per the stringent requirements of the global major. Therefore, there were quantitative as well as qualitative reasons for Hospira's unique move into India with significant investments. Investment of about $2 billion have been pumped into Hospira India. Hospira therefore decided to establish a truly low-cost, high-quality model to supplement its established manufacturing and R&D infrastructure that was largely US-centric. Hospira, as I said, didn't focus straight away on Market Pharma sterile injectables business. It started exploring various options. And finally, Hospira zeroed on Orchid and negotiated with Orchid to acquire Orchid sterile injectables business in March 2010. These are some of the products that the company was set to make. Ceftriaxone was one product. Cefuroxime was another product. Cephalexin was another product. So many products were being made. But out of those 10 to 12 injectables and oral products that were being made, 6 key injectables were chosen as the flagship products for the company, although other products also came. There was no other generic pharma company globally that committed itself to this level of investment in sterile injectables space. Hospira's India strategy was a resounding vote of confidence in India advantage and India leadership. I keep saying that effective leadership is the key driver for strategic execution. Hospira positioned me as the managing director for India to not only execute the initial strategy with the available structure, but to also take the strategy, structure and execution to progressively higher levels. What did it comprise? First, several organic and inorganic moves to expand the acquired manufacturing and R&D base. As I said, these were 10 to 12 programs which were seamlessly and cohesively knitted together. Second, establish greenfield plants and acquire new manufacturing facilities. Third, expand R&D facilities in pharmaceuticals. Establish new R&D facilities in biologics and device R&D. And as a result of all of these initiatives, full spectrum of pharmaceutical value chain spanning active pharmaceutical ingredients and finished dosage forms in the sterile inject space was established in India. This was a huge strategic plan comprising multi-billion-dollar investments which was executed in a tight time frame of just 4 years. This strategy, which evolved over a period of time, not in the full spectrum as I said now, was executed by first acquiring Orchid sterile injectables business. And at that point of time, the only other card on the table was to establish a greenfield sterile injectables facility in Vizag. However, based on my advocacy and based on the India advantage which the acquired team could demonstrate, the global major decided that it would undertake several other initiatives so that every vertical in Hospira Global would have a corresponding vertical in India. That's how the whole strategic canvas played out. And you can also recognize that because of superior execution, it was possible for Hospira Global to take additional strategic initiatives. This is a proof that execution and further planning and further strategizing can happen simultaneously and in an iterative fashion. Alignment is an important aspect of professional life as well as corporate growth in multinational companies. Hospira's strategy in India was arguably the boldest and the most progressive strategy which was relentlessly executed in the Indian pharmaceutical space with total emphasis on the regulated markets of US and EU. To be able to do that, the companies, that is the Indian subsidiary as well as the US parent, decided that there should be a board of directors which would align global values, global systems and global procedures with Indian entrepreneurship, Indian frugal engineering and India's passion for growth. A board of directors was established comprising the Indian managing director and global leaders to ensure strategic alignment and corporate governance. I had the opportunity to reinforce this organizational leadership with induction of several senior leaders from the global and Indian talent pools. And apart from that induction, they were kind of culturally homogenized. We took the cultural facets that were good from the leaders who came in, but also ensured that the strong cultural moorings that were outstanding in the acquired team were passed on to the new team. We had 14 senior managers when the acquisition was done in March 2010. When I moved out of the company towards end 2015, we had 100 senior managers and leaders. But it was very difficult to say who were the original 14 and who were the newcomers. That was the kind of seamless cultural integration that was accomplished in this leadership development aspect. The company had phenomenal growth from its inception in March 2010 to its peak in April 2015. And this phenomenal expansion was quantitative, both in terms of R&D and manufacturing. From one site, we expanded to 9 sites, covering manufacturing and R&D and pharma, biologics, medical devices. From just 460 people who moved to Hospira in 2010, we had a count of 4,000 employees all across these 9 sites. What was sterile injectable formulations only in the cephalosporin antibiotics became a full value chain from API to formulations across 3 therapeutic product groups and also the non-antibiotic product group, and covering R&D and manufacturing. Therefore, from just being an antibiotics injectables portfolio to a total injects portfolio was achieved through well-aligned strategic approach as well as well-aligned strategic execution. This study of Hospira India is an outstanding example, not only a leadership trilogy of strategy, structure and execution, but also the highest standards of corporate governance in synergistic action. Every strategic development has to be accompanied by building of value. We don't invest millions of dollars for the sake of just investment. They have to build value for the patients, for the stakeholders. The essence of success lies in how well aligned and integrated these 3 components are, that is strategy, structure and execution. So this leadership framework of vision, strategy, structure and execution built value. One, Hospira India was a 100% subsidiary of Hospira Inc. Therefore, it involved strong bonds in terms of risk-taking and reward sharing and a belief in the model to overcome all competitive opposition. Later on, the value that was built in Hospira India was a significant factor in Pfizer considering Hospira as an overall acquisition for strengthening its global generics business. As we are aware, Pfizer is a global pharmaceutical giant with leadership in pharmaceuticals, biologics, vaccines, generics and biosimilars. Although it had its own generics business, it wanted significant strength to be acquired in the sterile injectable space. That's why Hospira India became very valuable, as well as Hospira Global became even more valuable as the owner of Hospira India for Pfizer. Pfizer is known for aggressive growth through mergers and acquisitions, and Hospira's acquisition was one of the biggest acquisitions that Hospira did in the 2000s. Hospira is now a Pfizer company, is called Pfizer Healthcare India Private Limited. It became a global leader in sterile injectables and biosimilars and is poised to serve global demand for innovative medicines and vaccines as well as the broader generic pharmaceuticals effectively. Not only that, the centers of excellence in medical affairs and regulatory affairs that were set up bloomed further under Pfizer's ownership into global centers of excellence with probably 5-fold increase in manpower as Pfizer built and saw more value in those endeavors as well. If Pfizer acquired Hospira in September 2015 for its unique global leadership in the sterile injectables domain, the infrastructure created, operations established and value generated in India by Hospira's leadership would surely have been an important consideration. So when you look at this organization redesign in terms of global pharma and Indian ramp up was critical to the kind of strategic canvas that was laid out and intense strategic execution that could take place. Once the initial objective of acquisition was achieved, the Indian subsidiary and the global parent began drawing up major strategic expansion and diversification prints for the Indian operations. This was well advocated by the local leadership and supported and endorsed by the global leadership. So what was the strategic blueprint? We immediately doubled capacities in the acquired antibiotics business, both R&D and manufacture. We established a greenfield state-of-the-art injectables facility. We established new R&D centers in medical device and software and biologics, and we acquired sterile and non-sterile API facilities. Out of these, the doubling of capacities is a brownfield action. That is, there is already some kind of capability, asset base available. We have doubled that. The acquisition of sterile and non-sterile API facilities, that is Market Pharma's residual API facilities in Aurangabad, which was state-of-the-art, was also a brownfield activity. However, establishment of greenfield state-of-the-art injectables facility and establishment of new R&D centers in medical device, software and biologics were de novo activities. So it was a strategic blueprint that canvassed everything that could be done for global major to be done in India. That was the approach taken. To be able to do that, the organization was structured through the matrix mode. As I said, matrix organization is a very effective organization when a global MNC enters a new country and establishes an R&D with specific objectives but with a broad canvas. In this organizational canvas, we had Hospira doing the full spectrum of functional activities, operations, R&D, human resources, finance and marketing. However, Indian subsidiary was focused on operations, particularly manufacturing operations and R&D operations. So we created an organization structure wherein Indian subsidiary was very strong in terms of operations and R&D, supported by various other corporate functions including human resources and finance. Because of the operations focus, I, as the CEO of the Indian operations, reported the senior-most functionary and a member of the global leadership team of global operations. We had one-to-one relationships between respective Indian functions and the respective global functions, besides my having direct reporting relationships by the various functions in India. This matrix organization provided functional expertise, while the local departments assembled Indian and overseas returning Indian scientific diaspora. This helped in a rapid build-up of competencies with scale in India. To be able to build an organization of that standing from 14 leaders to 100 leaders plus, and from 460 employees to 4,000 employees plus, was not possible unless the organization was both structurally designed and physically empowered to carry out multiple tasks with clear goals and a focused value system. As a result of this kind of organizational redesign, we could create scale with competencies. This graphic below further drills down the global-local matrix, which provided expert-to-expert global-local linkages while simultaneously ensuring leadership alignment at higher echelons. So I said global CEO had global operations and global R&D amongst various other functions reporting to him globally. In that we had US operations and non-US operations. And within R&D we had pharma R&D, device R&D and biologics R&D. In India we had Indian formulations operations, Indian formulations R&D, Indian API R&D, Indian device R&D, Indian biologics R&D and India API operations. Formulations operations themselves had three aspects. One, brownfield formulation site, greenfield formulation site and brownfield API sites. All of these things were merged together through the lines which were shown in the organization chart. While the matrix may look complex, it worked seamlessly on ground due to alignment in leadership and due to complementarity of expertise. It also represented a great example of central guidance with regional empowerment and autonomy. So the organization redesign was necessary in terms of supporting the global canvas with local scale up. In each case, what we are talking about, we had organization design ahead of organizational recruitment, and everything was planned and systematic. As a result, we had several first-in-class achievements that were notched up in a short span of 4 years. As I said, expansion from 1 site to 9 sites, all within India, with presence in southern and western India. Brownfield acquisitions, greenfield locations, multiple R&D competencies in pharmaceutical R&D and API R&D. Scientists themselves moved from 100 to 200. API R&D scientists moved from 100 to 150. Device R&D scientists moved from 0 to 200. Biologics R&D, again a greenfield affair, moved from 0 to 200. Regulatory affairs, medical affairs together increased from 200 to 500. This was part of the total increase in employee count from 450 to 4,500. This was also accompanied by an increase in product range from 14 products when the acquisition took place to almost 60 to 80 products by the time the strategic plan was rolled out in execution. And the whole effort was technology intensive, capital intensive. And to be able to support this, apart from the board of directors I talked about, apart from the senior leadership integration that I talked about, we also created a learning university so that constantly new skills could be imbibed by the teams in India. Some of the products that were made in India were being made for the first time, and they were also of complex technology and rigorous quality standards. So there was a need to reskill and retool people available in India to the standards that were required to do those new products. Also, new systems and processes had to be put in place so that the entire conduct of operations was completely ethical and completely in tune with the global best practices in terms of accounting, in terms of governance, and in terms of audit compliance. Organizational redesign, therefore, was the foundation of business transformation at Hospira India. Skill build-up and employee scale-up were the twin drivers of phenomenal growth that occurred in the scientific, technological, and business base. Having put before you how Hospira India became such a powerful force, I also would take a few minutes to talk about the cultural transformation that occurred at Hospira Global. Mike Ball was the CEO of Hospira Global, who took over in 2011. From the time he came into Hospira, he started making a big difference at Hospira. He transformed the culture from within the organization. Hospira Global was a company with aged plants and dated process. However, it was a leader in global generics, having as much as 31% market share in global injectables. It was also number 2 in devices, next only to CareFusion. But Hospira Global had certain quality issues, certain manufacturing throughput issues, mainly in terms of US FDA approvals and regulatory compliances. To be able to transform Hospira, apart from whatever that has been thought about and executed in Hospira India, certain cultural anchors were taken up for transformation. The whole theme was of making a difference to the patient. So, first cultural anchor was being quality focused, compliant, and acting with integrity. All the three, as you can see, are interrelated. If the company doesn't have quality focus, it cannot be compliant with the regulatory requirements. And if the people do not act with integrity, quality cannot be sustained. So quality, compliance, and integrity are intertwined, interrelated, and completely part of one system. Second, being customer centric, because these are life-saving antibiotics. We need to listen to the patients, the healthcare providers, the doctors, the nurses as to how the drugs are working in real life situation. To be able to manage a global corporation, you need to be accountable and responsible, particularly when the company undertakes a lot of modernization within the global system and a lot of expansion in the outside US system. And Communication is the key of cultural transformation. When you have direct, authentic communication, cultural transformation becomes possible. We need to discuss and debate the differences, but at the same time achieve alignment. And to be able to be effective in competitive generic market, we need to be fast and nimble and continuously improving. That was the fifth cultural anchor. And one of the ways in which you can stay ahead of the pack is by anticipating the mega trends, anticipating and shaping the mega trends, and understanding how the future would look like. The other way in which you could make a difference was to focus on the main thing. There are 100 things which a company needs to do. All the 100 are important. As they say, the chain is as strong as the weakest link. So every chain link has to be strong. But that said, we cannot have disproportionate emphasis on small things, which could be independently and well looked after by people with different kinds of capabilities. So people who have to do main things have to focus on the main things. As an example, when you are doing a scientific project, the main thing for the scientific leader is the science, the experimentation, the ability to deliver the product from the recipe that was as a formula. But his or her core activities should not be writing reports, talking to senior management, justifying the projects, measuring the milestones. These are important, but they could be given administratively to a project management officer for whom that is the main thing. By focusing on the main thing in every person's professional work, we can have better synergy along with better focus and better delivery. And that occurs across the vertical value chain as well as the horizontal value chain. And not to lose sight, we want it to be a global company yet interdependent. So these were the cultural anchors that existed for Hospira that were articulated for the first time in this expansive but focused manner. So based on that, Mike Ball, whose photograph you can see, undertook a major culture transformation strategy. He said, we are executing a deliberate multi-part plan which will transform the cultural anchors from words to how Hospirians choose to behave. And the 5 planks of this cultural journey was communication, second, integration, 3, top-down leadership, but with bottom-up engagement, and finally, reward and recognition. There were several initiatives that were launched as part of Mike Ball's tenure to be able to achieve this cultural transformation effectively. And each of these things had several examples which could be lived through and which could be experienced in terms of cultural transformation. For example, all the 100 plus leaders of the global corporation would converge every year at Chicago and spend 3 days of quality time to understand the strategy, provide inputs, and create a new strategic way of looking at the future, overcoming the bottlenecks, developing new solutions, and building better interpersonal relationships. As the key stakeholders for the entire global operations, these 100 people needed to be converging together and developing the kind of relationship they used to develop year after year in such annual leadership summits. Integration was also achieved on a real-time basis by having town halls, by having regular review meetings and frequent visits of Indian executives or other global executives to the headquarters and visits by global headquarter leaders to various sites. Hospira embarked on this resolute cultural transformation journey to overcome barriers to change and achieve success. This has in turn served as the bedrock of strategic transformation at Hospira. It is not to say now that there were no barriers to success at all. There were barriers to success, but Hospira could achieve success in this cultural transformation and therefore the business transformation because of certain strategies it adopted with resolution and with resoluteness. The first barrier to success was resistance to change from legacy culture and practices. As I said, Hospira was nothing but decades old hospital products division of Abbott, which was probably at the tail end of leadership attention in the vast pharmaceutical empire that Abbott was. Therefore, a type of employee morale was existing, and a type of compliance to quality systems and operations throughput was there. When that was sought to be changed to the modern requirements of an agile and effective generics firm, there was bound to be resistance to change. Similarly, when US FDA elevated its standards and therefore a lot more needed to be done on the quality front, there was resistance to change. So the first barrier to success was resistance to change from legacy culture and practices. And to be able to achieve success through the articulation of the 8 cultural anchors and also the 5-plank engagement plan, the cultural anchors were integrated into everyday activities and communications. The second barrier was that all the leaders were busy in expanding and increasing output, expanding facilities and increasing output. The time commitment required of leaders to develop mindsets and skills required to drive the cultural change was the second barrier. To be able to do that, systemic changes were made in performance expectations and reward systems, apart from integration through various summits and meetings. The third barrier to success was to ensure that the messages are penetrating and being assimilated at every level of the organization. To achieve that, senior leadership team support, leadership, and role modeling was put in place. Rolling out the communications and programming is a very important aspect of managing a barrier to succeed. Even if something has been thought about at the top leadership level or even at the middle management level, unless it is rolled out across the company as a credible communication campaign, it would not be able to make a success. So it was required to quickly develop such a communication and program plan so that the tipping point to achieve the cultural change was achieved at the earliest. To be able to do that, there was a broad engagement of leaders at every level to drive change and transformation, and a very effective and powerful communications department, which also had investor relations responsibility, was created to be able to achieve the rapid rollout of well-conceptualized communication plan. There was also a barrier to success in terms of the absence of visible cultural theme in 2010. But the internal development of cultural anchors, continuous communication and programming helped overcome this barrier. So enormous value was created at Hospira through cultural transformation and strategic execution, of which creating the India operations and merging India operations with global operations was one striking and impactful facet. Having seen a real-life example, let's also understand how organization redesign would work in the case of industrial transformation. So I take an example of electric vehicle transformation in an automobile company. There is no particular name or company that is being chosen, but I am trying to simulate how organizational redesign can be carried out in the case of electric vehicle transformation. There are 6 principles of organizational redesign that are easy to implement and effective in terms of organizational transformation if planned and executed methodically as per the construct below. Let me outline these 6 principles. 1. Review external and internal ecosystems. Review roles, performance and performance of internal executives. That is the first principle. Second, identify the new growth drivers at 3 levels, that is departmental, new hires and reskilling. Third principle, determine current state of the business and the future state of the business. Similarly, determine the current state of the organization and the future state, and it could be with reference to skills as well. Then prioritize transformation. Determine new leadership requirements and onboard new leaders. To be able to do that, create organization transformation team and make the CHRO, Chief Human Resource Officer, the executor of the transformation of organization. Roll out pilots in identified areas and extend organization-wide effort after feedback. Now, these 6 principles are not sequential. They have to occur simultaneously and through very strong cohesive group effort. And the partners in this effort are the internal and external stakeholders, organization consultants, the board of directors, and the search agencies. Unless all these stakeholders are brought together in terms of understanding the criteria and the necessity for organizational redesign and put in place a well-designed organization, it is not possible to achieve the kind of industrial transformation a company might want to have. A leader and manager team may be able to undertake all of the organization redesign activities by themselves. However, it is important to seek external advice in certain areas because the company will be venturing out into new domains for the first time, particularly when we talk about things such as electric vehicle. So step 1, review of internal and external ecosystems. The redesign principles for monoproduct companies are simpler compared to others. However, for monoproduct companies moving into multi-product companies, and more so products which are going to make the existing products obsolete, the challenges are pretty many more. So even in a monoproduct company, the roles, process, people and performance management system need to be reviewed every 4 years. Then imagine the kind of reviews that have to take place when the products themselves have to be completely changed. To be able to do that, we have to have a 6-pronged plan. We have to review the development and manufacturing ecosystem with reference to the products. Identify what could change internally. That is, if this is the level of in-housing I am doing, that is, I am making my gears, I am making my crankshafts, I am making my chassis components, what else I need to do or what else I need to stop doing. So product level, component level, vendor level analysis of the change triggers of the ecosystem have to be identified. Then we have to identify the external change triggers. That is, would the customers behave in the same manner? Would the dealers be adequate to launch and service an electric vehicle? What are the regulatory and usage norms? Because at the launch there would not be many regulatory norms because everybody wants just an electric vehicle. But as issues come up, as advantages come up, the regulatory system would start taking place. There would be homologation standards, there would be pre-testing standards, and there would be quality standards that are imposed in terms of energy density and things like that. And there would be also the demand and marketing ecosystem that needs to be reviewed in a holistic way that would include the charging system, the battery swapping system, and so on. The talent ecosystem that can support all of these things has to be reviewed and analyzed, and that ecosystem must be understood. When we talk about this ecosystem, do we get these people from the foreign universities, Indian universities, research labs, other companies doing similar kind of work? It is not necessary that you need to get people only from the electric automobile industry because that industry is nascent, but probably you can get people from the semiconductor industry, you can get people from the sensor industry, you can get people from the specialized software companies such as Tata Elxsi or things like that. You can get people from electronics industry and so on. And once you understand the total talent ecosystem that is available, you need to identify specific people skills that are required and create a new end-to-end value chain. These reviews as above help the company identify the gaps and take steps to redesign the organization structure, the talent system, and redefine roles and people requirements. Thereafter, the structure will need to be redesigned based on appropriate principles from time to time. What you are starting with is a fundamental new platform, and that could be deficient in certain respects, and those deficiencies must be gapped and the overall platform elevated. Step 2, identifying new growth drivers. If pre-work is carried out diligently as considered earlier in step 1, we can find out the new growth drivers. When a monoproduct firm transforms itself from petrol engine car to electric car business, we need the understanding of the new growth drivers. What are the new departments and expanded departments that we need to have? Clearly, new R&D skills, hybrid and electric development units, vendor development for new electric and electronic components, technology sourcing, vendor investment, testing and homologation, etc. And what is the new hybrid organization that would be created as a result of these new skills and new departments? Completely new ecosystem coordinators for charging stations, battery swapping, government incentives, vehicle financing, dealer development, mobility as a service, etc. So you have new departments and expanded departments as the internal department, but at the same time a whole lot of new coordinators to create a new supportive ecosystem. Together they create the new hybrid organization. Generally, 3 types of gaps are identified as a result of this kind of study. 1, a need for entirely new departments, need for having newly brought in hires with higher level of newer skills in existing departments, and 3, the need for reskilling existing employees. It would be inappropriate to forget the vast base of existing talent, because this existing talent has served the company very well in this phase of technology. Rather than abdicate them, it behoves a positive management and positive leadership to reskill and retool them, leverage their loyalty and build it into a new motive force for the organization's transformation. That is important. Step 3 is to clearly identify the current state and the future state. The future state must be identified in respect of key in-house competencies and external competencies, and that will drive the expansiveness of the redesigned organization. So in terms of R&D domain, we will have IC engine and transmission as the current state. The future state will require electric power pack and transmission technology. Once you identify this, you try to understand who would be in a position to supply those, whether they should be manufactured in-house within the group or they should be outsourced. Procurement has become routinized in an established company. It is procurement of routine mechanical and electrical parts. But the future state will be a totally new state-of-the-art in procurement that focuses on new electrical and electronics components. Vendor development is part of procurement process. But in the future state, new vendor development and qualification would probably become an independent and procurement leading department. Technology sourcing is always part of regular R&D. But in the future state, we need a department which does new technology scanning and undertakes sourcing for those kinds of activities. On-road operation is done through regular servicing. But we may need a new department not only for vehicle servicing but also for battery charging and swapping. Company which is moving into electric vehicles needs to understand the total concept of electric mobility and provide that as a total service. That's how the whole concept would take off and customers would be enthused to buy electric vehicles. Startup development is almost in a minor portion in the current well-developed industrial system, but in the future state we need to have several startups which come up with game-changing technologies and electrification. Therefore, we may need a new department for evaluating and investing in electric vehicle startups. Testing routine certifications, and in future it would be for EV and component certifications, including certification for energy density, for battery standing, the life cycle of various components, the safety. Fire hazards are part of electric vehicles, as we are seeing in 1 or 2 cases which are encountered time to time. So new safety standards, new international regulations will keep coming in, and we require special focus on testing and homologation. It is therefore in respect of electric transformation of automobiles a virtual complete reinvention of the component and vehicle infrastructure. Gaps can be bridged in the usual course, but such transformations require total reinvention. It also is important to mention that we may think of putting an electric battery and power pack within the space available for the engine and gearbox, but that is not a very optimal way of doing things. Electric vehicle development must be native. It must start with ground up design the rest of the vehicles for lightweight, high strength optimization, and reconfigure the space available to be able to do a real, genuinely effective electric transformation. We all know that the engine, that is the power pack, is kept in the front, but in the electric vehicles we can keep the entire battery system all through the chassis. That is one option. It could be put in the rear side, it could also be put in the front side, all balanced all through. So these kinds of changes are possible in the design configuration, which will require redesign of the chassis and also bringing enough newer, lighter materials such as aluminium in this whole effort. Step 4. Again, an important aspect, creating the new leadership nucleus. The CEO would remain the same, but as new technology is coming in and new business models are coming in, we need a nucleus of new leaders or transformed leaders who can guide and execute the redesign and transformation process. The organizational structure would be the same: apex leaders, CXO level, and team leads. But you can see the new positions that are coming in. The current R&D head would continue, but you would need reskilling of the current scientific force, and you need to also integrate new skilled people from external talent system. We need a new development for electric vehicles with new departments. You need the current operations head to ensure that the existing operations are continuing, but we also need to take the best of new vehicle development and reskill. That could be, for example, commonization of the assembly line between an ICE engine and a hydrogen cell engine, or between ICE engine, electric vehicle, and hydrogen cell engine, as well as the CNG. So there is a need for reskilling of project engineers, a need for reskilling of assembly managers as well. We need a new EV operations head, because eventually the electric vehicle portfolio would occupy 100% of its overall portfolio. So we need new departments. Upskilling, new skill hires, whole new departments and new leaders are part of the effort to create a new leadership nucleus in electric transformation. Apart from strengthening the organization as per the above construct, selective one-time consultancy support can also be taken to avoid too much of fixed cost to the organization. Step 5. Creating the organization transformation team. While this is organization-wide, as I have explained, we also need a top leadership attention that is focused on electric transformation. So we need to create an OTT, or organization transformation team, which comprises the governance team, the CEO and the CXOs, who provide the overall governance, oversight and support. We need a transformation team, select CXOs and CHRO, who will be the sponsors for the transformations that would occur in various departments and across departments. We also need an execution team comprising the CHRO and department heads with accountability to transform the organization in terms of reskilling, addition of new skills, and creating new departments and new nuclei. A 3-level team structure, as I have proposed here, comprising the senior leadership team, select senior leadership team members, and executing team would be very helpful for well-aligned and accountable execution. Step 6 is pilot rollout and organization expansion. Nothing can be rolled out 100% into the market straight away. Each business transformation requires a distinctive organizational execution to suit the priorities. Whatever be the level of development that is done in the R&D and manufacturing suites, we really require the field conditions to prove whether what we have done are the right ones. To be able to do that, piloting is extremely important. There are some advantages of holistic execution across the nation, across the markets, or across the product range, but a pilot rollout certainly is beneficial and practical to optimize costs, correct the course if it's wrong, and also ensure right to market when the whole product range is launched across the market. So phase 1 will be hybrid and electric R&D, battery vendor development and technology sourcing. These are the essential critical phase 1 activities which require to be at the top gear to be able to create the minimum viable product as part of the electric vehicle transformation. Phase 2 would be startup evaluation and investment, full-scale vendor development, testing and homologation. Phase 3 will be external networking through charging, battery swapping, etc., dealer development, pilot and full-scale organization rollout. Each of these phases would have their own pilots in terms of acquiring new core competencies, developing new components and EVs, rolling out those pilots to demonstrate these new skills, new facilities, new activities, and finally standardize the commercial EV range, that is the ultimate desired product which would be acceptable to the market and affordable for the customers. A 3-phase execution plan starting from acquisition of core technologies, core components and development, and manufacturing of electric vehicles would ensure progressive pilot with regular organizational and business rollout. So you can see the 6 steps simulated by me for a new electric vehicle lineup and a new vehicle organization focused on electrification. So with this we come to the end of this lecture, wherein I have given you two case studies. One, a real life case study of a global generics major setting up a huge India facility in R&D and manufacturing and creating a new center of gravity for India, or a better way of putting, shifting the center of gravity from the USA to India and building substantial value for itself and for the patients. The real and the importance of organizational redesign and the choice of the right organizational structure and the right organizational leadership and process in making such a transformation happen. The second, a part of this has been the cultural transformation that was achieved through a very specific cultural anchor program and a very specific 5-step cultural development program. The second aspect, that is the second distinct aspect which I have outlined, is the simulation of organizational redesign, business process design and operational strategy redesign to ensure that an existing automobile industry is able to create a new electric vehicle infrastructure and achieve commercialization. This example will be appropriate even for the electric vehicle manufacturers who are coming up for the first time in the industry. So with this, I am sure you would have got the overview as well as the depth and spirit of how organizational redesign will help business restructuring and business redesign and ultimately lead to greater value for the markets, customers and the various stakeholders and the company, of course. We'll again meet in the next lecture. Thank you.